Areas of interest developing across the Pacific on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 20th. So right now a somewhat active tropics, although nothing particularly strong. Still watching that tropical depression in the Mediterranean Sea. It's now moved over Cyprus this evening, and a new system marked 25W in the Western Pacific, the one that's headed towards the northern Philippines. Philippine name is Obet. In the Atlantic though, there's nothing on the radar on day 142 of hurricane season, and long may it remain that way. Here's hoping. There's nothing active or anything to look at all for the next 5 days. Excellent. The Eastern Pacific has a very high chance of development, however, for this area of interest, which is continuing along the coast of Mexico, and it looks like it's probably going to get designated very soon indeed. Maybe even before I've had time to check after the bulletin comes out, but pretty soon we expect that will become a tropical storm, probably a hurricane. Western Pacific, look at this. Nesat and Hainan both scrubbed now. Nesat looking terrible on satellite imagery with no convection. Tropical depression 25 there, still in the Philippine Sea and not moving very much, and that area of interest still behind it, 20%. And here in the Indian Ocean, we've now bumped it up to 80% for that system in the Andaman Sea. It feels like we've been waiting forever for this thing to form, and that wait is going to be a little bit longer yet. But it still looks like there is a big threat for the coast of India, Bangladesh, and possibly over to Myanmar. Here's the latest satellite imagery across the Atlantic right now, and you can see that front dominating proceedings in the western Atlantic zone off the eastern seaboard of the United States, and elsewhere it's really dry air. There's really nothing particularly noteworthy to look at on the current imagery there. And looking towards the Eastern Pacific, you can see quite obviously that system, which is starting to get some good rotation about it, convection blowing up, so looking decent when we look at it from this angle, and one or two other little features out at sea as well of note, and perhaps a little bit of rainfall for California. Here's a look at the European region. There's Cyprus, which is underneath that tropical depression now that we have designated. Convection blowing up quite a bit throughout the last 24 hours, and it's holding on still. This is the area of interest in the Eastern Pacific, and you can see it there blowing up convection. This is the mesoscale rapid scan floater, and good cloud tops starting to develop there, but I think we still need a little bit more convincing on that center of circulation, but pretty much as soon as that happens, that will be at least a tropical depression. Whether they find tropical storm force winds on it immediately or not, that's going to be another question. Western Pacific, you can see the depression there in the towards the top right hand side of your image almost, that convection blowing up over a center of circulation, still somewhat attached to a front off to the northeast. And look further towards the west there, you can see the ghost of Nesat just off the coast of Hainan. It still has a center of circulation by the looks of things, just a low level one of course. There's really nothing more left of this storm. There it is right now on the latest satellite imagery. This is the rapid scan Himawari 8, still looking at this system in particular. Those red zones show very low cloud, so it is there, but you won't see it on that nighttime imagery particularly well, and lack of convection really means that it's got nothing left in terms of being a tropical cyclone anymore, and that's why we've given it the remnant low status. There's the west of the Western Pacific Ocean, and potentially looking down towards that equatorial zone for that next system that might form and head towards the Mariana Islands next week or the weekend, and that Philippine storm there too. Indian Ocean, you can see what's going on here. Still not much organization going on in the Andaman Sea, and that's why we're still waiting, but model consensus is very much there, and still increasing actually, which is why we're very confident in that system's chances of development, 80%. And looking towards the Australian region, still a lot of rainfall occurring along the eastern coast and down towards South Australia as well. But further towards the east, things looking to be a little bit calmer after that front move through the Fiji region. So generally calm there. Let's check those sea surface temperatures today, and they're still pushing 30 degrees or more underneath that potential tropical cyclone. 30 degrees in that little gap near the coast of Mexico, so it could take full advantage of that. Gulf of Mexico still looking decent, at least in the southern half. Northern half is tailing off now. The Caribbean and the main development region still looking hot as well, 30 degrees plus, but realistically now the main development region is probably shutting down, and we're going to be looking at Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico systems for the rest of the season. Indian Ocean still very warm, 30 degrees plus, and those isotherms still extending themselves across the coast of India there, so it's even warmer when it gets closer to land, that potential system, than where it is right now. There's the Western Pacific as well, still quite a few pockets of 30 degrees Celsius. Where Tropical Depression 25W is, it's around 29 degrees. It will drop a little bit as it passes the north coast of Luzon and then rise once again into the South China Sea, but temperatures further north are starting to drop, but the Western Pacific still very much open for business. Here's the sea surface temperature anomalies. Western Pacific only a little bit above average. The Eastern Pacific still dominated by the La Nina, but generally in the tropical zone it's a little bit above average where that storm is tracking right now, so watch out. The Atlantic there generally above average, but of course that doesn't mean everything, and we are still yet to reach the annual average. Only 11 storms so far, and here is the Atlantic right now, and you can see still those hot pockets in the Caribbean Sea, very warm oceanic heat content. Eastern Pacific not so much. Western Pacific still quite a bit there as well, mainly in the equatorial zone, but still quite a bit in the tropical zone too, especially along the coast of the Visayas of the Philippines. Here's the computer models, the GFS, showing the progress of this potential hurricane in the next few days, and there it is, developing once again, at least category 2, very consistent on this for the GFS, and then rounding that corner and making landfall probably in Nayarit after passing through the Islas Marias. Once again, shades of Orlene there that we had earlier this month, but still there is some uncertainty about that system, not only its track but especially its intensity. Western Pacific, you can just see that system pushing through Tropical Depression 25W, rounding the northern tip of Luzon, and then probably becoming a tropical storm and maybe a typhoon there actually into the South China Sea, trying to follow the footsteps of Nesat, and not actually doing quite a good job actually as it continues towards the west then southwest. So another look-alike almost, although it shouldn't be as strong as Nesat was. Of course, Nesat peaked as, I think, a category 2. Indian Ocean, let's watch this system developing first in the Andaman Sea and then out into the Bay of Bengal proper, and it takes a good while for that rotation to fully circulate, and then off it goes. Once it's developed, it strengthens quite quickly there and almost takes you by surprise before it makes landfall near the Ganges River Delta in Bangladesh. A very powerful storm that could be due to its size, not particularly strong, but that certainly has the potential, if it goes like that forecast there, to deliver extremely high amounts of rain over a large area. Australian region still up here again. The GFS is still keen on a tropical storm to form off the coast of Queensland and down to New South Wales. Not quite as keen as it was in earlier model runs, but it's still there. ECMWF is showing maybe one or two little hints that it might happen as well, but still not marked right now by any of our analysts, and so it's going to be nil at the moment. And here's some of that rainfall that we were talking about for the Indian Ocean region from this potential cyclone. It doesn't matter if it's disorganized, if it is as broad as it's being shown on that model run. Look at the amount of reds and into the pink areas there, showing very vulnerable part of the world when it comes to water. And you can see there up to 17 inches of rain there. That's 400 millimeters or more if this forecast comes to pass, and I think it's going to end up being something like this. And even for parts of Myanmar there, up to 6 inches, 150 millimeters, and well inland in Bangladesh and even into that northeastern part of India, 4 to 6 inches potentially there, up to 150 millimeters. So something to keep watching out for as we monitor the progress of this, but it is taking quite a while to materialize. Longer range, day 5 to 10. Yesterday we showed a potential Caribbean system, and it's still on the cards there for the GFS model, although it's near the end of the 10-day period and I don't think it's got any other support, and it's a little bit of a it's a push to see this potentially happen, but certainly the climatology backing is there, and this time it's going for a more westerly track than what we were looking at last night, and potentially, if I don't trip over my words, a track into Jamaica. Western Pacific in this moderate range as well. Not much going on in that early period of that 5 to 10 days, and then you can see what might have been that system towards the Mariana Islands actually not really doing much at all. So I guess the Western Pacific will stay fairly quiet, with one or two systems trying to form out of potentially difficult conditions. Just look out for one or two curling systems there through the Marianas right near the end there of that loop. Well, you can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store. We have all of our usuals, our items of course, and you can request full season and individual storm animations bespokely made for your benefit, and you can find our Still Waiting for Hone t-shirts still in stock as well. Into the Scilly range, potentially two systems there in the Atlantic caught by the GFS. The one on the western side there taking a track through Cuba and then dying off as it moves off towards the northeast, but you saw further east there perhaps a little spin up in the further eastern part of the Atlantic. Reminds me perhaps maybe something a little bit like Tony in 2012, as well as that storm which the beginnings of it a little bit like a Sandy track, so maybe there's some of those comparisons could be made, but not really. I doubt either of those two systems will form. Western Pacific during that very long range period as well, there is potentially one or two storms that develop there, and eventually something does formulate into a fully fledged tropical storm and then a typhoon as it shoots off towards the north and northeast once again, like quite a few storms we've had in recent weeks. And there it is again. Not much else for the Western. You remember that GFS model run, a few model runs that were showing consistency for an extremely powerful typhoon into the Philippines? Well, this just goes to show how quickly it can change back again, and that's why we call it the Scilly range. If you see those things on social media and people peddle it to make it seem like it's absolutely going to happen, be wary of that. Anyway, on this day, on October 20th, 1987, Typhoon Lin, a Category 5, peaking on this day, well out over the open waters of the Philippine Sea. It had just cleared the Mariana Islands, and it looked pretty good when you look at that satellite imagery as well. So a powerful storm there. Nothing else active on this day in this year. Of course, just a few days after the Great Storm affected the British Isles, just to crowbar a local reference from my perspective in here for a moment. But Lin being the main feature on the 20th. Back to this year, and the next name on the Atlantic naming list now is Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific, it's still Roslyn, and in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. And the wait is real. It's been going on now for I think over 3 years. In the Western Pacific now, we're waiting for Nalgi, and in the North Indian Ocean, the next name is still Sitrang. Once again, another storm. It feels like I've been naming to death on this section for quite some time now, saying, oh, it might be on the way shortly. In the Australian region, though, Darian is next up. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, Cheniso. And in the South Pacific, our next name is Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again, as always, tomorrow night.